Good evening and welcome to Issues. As you know, Issues is a community program that deals with individuals in the community. This evening we're very happy to have Mark Ahronson. Mark is a financial consultant, and this evening we're specifically going to be looking at retirement funding. Some of you may be surprised as we go through this conversation, but I do believe you will find things that can help you in your retirement planning. Good evening, Mark, and welcome to Issues.
Thank you very much indeed, Richard.
My first question to you is, why would it be advantageous for me to participate in retirement funding beyond what my employer offers?
What I would say, first of all, is I'm actually yet to meet anybody who has suggested to me that the pension fund that they participate through their company is going to be sufficient and facilitate them the lifestyle that they wish to have in retirement. Now, you must consider that to obtain a full company pension scheme benefits, an individual may be requested to actually carry out at least 40 years worth of service. Which is a considerable length of time. It must be appreciated that a job isn't always for life now, and that maybe an individual might want to have a change in career and a change in occupation, which inevitably means that they may change providers, and it's not always transferable from one scheme to another. It may well be that the individual hasn't actually participated in that pension scheme for sufficient length of period. So what would happen is that they would actually end up getting maybe a refund on only their contributions, which means in essence they might end up needing to start again. I always say to people, this really isn't an exercise of making everybody a multi-millionaire. This is more of an exercise of ensuring that one has and can maintain their standard of living in retirement. So I would say retirement funding, in addition to whatever your company pension scheme can offer, is going to be essential, and action does need to be taken.
Yeah. Someone may also ask this question. They may be saying, yeah, Issues, we're seeing this program, but do you recognize these are difficult economical times? Now, what would you say to someone like that? Would you say, listen, I do understand, wait, you may need to start your retirement funding a little bit later? How would you address that question?
Yes, I think an individual really does need to look at what feels comfortable for them from a financial perspective. Budgeting is going to be paramount in any decision making going forward.
Okay. Now, taking that for granted now, how diversified should one's portfolio be?
Well, I think that the diversification is very representative of an individual. It's i.e. what actually sits comfortable them with themselves when it comes to their own risk profile. Now, risk profiling is when we try and ensure that an individual knows whether they're of a cautious nature, balanced nature, or even aggressive. Yeah. And if that's the case, then it's important that the actual investment mirrors those requirements. However, what could be even more important and more diverse is maybe to take a small percentage of that investment, and maybe in this instance, if it was a balanced portfolio, make that aggressive, but at the same token equalise that off and maybe put them more in a cautious environment. And so the overall is still exactly the same as far as their risk profile is concerned, but they're actually more diverse over many different investment sectors.
I think our audience can understand cautious and aggressive, but balanced. Could you explain that term a little bit more to us?
Well, balanced, a lot of people who have got company pension schemes would have received some form of correspondence when they first initiated the scheme, and it would actually ask them whether they were cautious, adventurous or balanced. And really a balanced portfolio is one whereby you have the opportunities to be able to really sort of spread that risk a little bit. It's just really to make sure that you're not either one extreme or the other.
Okay. Now, how soon should one start planning for their retirement in terms of finances?
Generally speaking, the earlier that you start, the better. Younger people, if they're considering retirement funding, actually giving themselves the opportunity to maybe even consider early retirement.
So you're saying if I start my financial retirement plan early, I can even retire early instead of waiting to 65.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
It's not a guarantee. Yeah. It's down to cash flow. But if by starting earlier, you're not really playing catch up.
Yeah.
And I think that can be quite important. There are actually simply two real categories of investment for retirement planning.
And those categories would be?
You've got lump sum investments and regular savings. Now, with a lump sum investment, it's an undisciplined amount of money that comes to the market once in a while. An individual may be looking for growth or income, or even a combination of the two. Regular savings, however, is a very different animal. It requires a commitment from the individual, maybe on a monthly, quarterly, half-yearly or annual basis. And majority of the retirement funding plans that people look at would be on a regular commitment. One, it's easier to budget, and secondly, you must appreciate that with this style of investment, the money that you put in at the very beginning is the money that was working the hardest for you. Conversely, if you put money in at 24 years and 11 months on a 25-year plan, 1 month's worth of growth is going to do very little.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned savings account. Many of our viewers have savings account. Now, is a saving account the best way to plan for your retirement?
In respect of...
As we look at interest rates and growth.
What, through the banks?
Yes, yes.
It's possibly too easy to say in today's market that the actual interest rates that are given by the banks is probably inefficient in respect that we're really not going to keep up with the rate of inflation. Personally speaking, I think it's very important that people do have money in the bank. They do need accessible funds. So we can't discount it completely, but it's part and parcel of the whole package, really, of looking at what makes up a whole retirement fund. And there's separate components all the time.
So when you sit down with a client and you start talking about retirement funding, you're saying that their savings is also part of that?
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, in terms of determining how much money one will need when they retire, how is that done?
Well, that's a very difficult question, and one that an individual will find difficult to answer. The great news, or the great thing about retirement funding, is that it's always reviewable, and an individual should constantly look at where their current situation is and make certain adjustments accordingly. Now, I believe that the question should really be, if I was retiring today, how much income would I require today? And once you've taken into consideration your income, your liabilities, and consider mortgage debt, will that still be in existence when you come to retire? Personal loans, car loan, credit cards. It may be that you're paying school fees. And all these things, hopefully, if they've actually expired by retirement, means that you don't need to actually anticipate paying for those once you are actually retired. Now, as a rule of thumb, most people would work on about 2/3 of their income. For an example, if we suggested that a 40-year-old who's looking at retiring normal age at 65 has 25 years worth of investment, and let's say their requirement was 100,000. Now, on 100,000, and unfortunately, we aren't going to be retiring today, so we've got 25 years worth of investment, but we've also exposing that money, or that's income, to 25 years worth of inflation.
Yes.
Now, inflation, we normally calculate it around about 5%. The reason being is that most developed countries in the world run inflation at about 5% or just below. I do appreciate in Bermuda it can be quite volatile. But if we consider the 100,000 and we associate a 5% inflation rate to it over the next 25 years, that money would need to be 340,000.
You're saying if today I want $100,000, I'm planning on $100,000. By the time I retire, I would need $300,000.
$340,000.
40,000,
yes.
And that would equal the $340,000 when I retire would only buy me what $100,000 today would.
Absolutely.
So I'm not really making more money.
No, it may sound a lot of money.
I'm only making enough to live in my lifestyle today.
Yes, which is basically what this whole exercise can be about. As I said earlier, it's unfortunate we can't make everybody multimillionaires.
Yeah.
It's generally too expensive.
Yeah. So is there a one-size-fits-all when it comes to financial retirement planning?
No, not at all. I think everybody throughout their life has different requirements at different stages. take a 50-year-old man, for example, he may already have the knowledge of knowing that he won't have any mortgage debt. He may have paid, children may be left home, educational costs have been paid for, and conversely, a 25-year-old embarking on their career and with the anticipation of a future house purchase and maybe the forthcoming family financial responsibilities are going to be in two completely different places, and so their requirements would be very different as well.
You know, sometimes things get pretty tight, and we may have a lump sum of money or some money in our retirement planning. What would you advise someone to borrow against that?
Occasionally, life does throw us the unexpected, and we will need to be in a position where we might need to borrow money from our retirement plan. Unfortunately, most company pension schemes don't necessarily allow us to do that until maybe we've attained a certain age. So if it becomes paramount that is important to an individual, then that flexibility is something that we would need to consider. And I think that the term borrowing would also maybe put too much pressure on the individual, because they may have to feel that they have to pay it back, and they might not want to feel obligated to do that. So by actually having flexibility to access funds prior to the actual retirement age can mean that we can alleviate penalties, and hopefully it won't be too detrimental to the investment.
You mentioned the term flexibility. So are you saying there's some retirement programs out there that indeed will allow you, even though you would not recommend it, there's some programs out there that would allow you to borrow?
Yeah, absolutely. As in respect of accessing funds, yes, there are. And some people don't necessarily think just retirement. There may be school fees planning, there may be home renovations, and so therefore to have access to funds prior to retirement may actually be an important facet of the whole arrangement.
Now, if someone should choose to borrow, do you have to pay it back with interest, or?
No, and this is what I was saying about the flexibility of being able to access the funds and don't feel obligated that you have to pay that money back.
We're out of time for this section. We'll take a break and we'll come right back.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome back to Issues. Today we have with us Mark Ahronson, and we're looking at retirement planning, and we've looked at some very interesting things so far. One of the key points that we were discussing before the break is that he would not recommend borrowing from one's retirement fund, but there are special occasions, there are special situations that would require someone to do this at times. And also from what he says, there are some plans that once you borrow, you really do not need to pay it back. But we're going to go right back to Mark. And Mark, one of the questions I had asked earlier is, how does one determine how much money they will need for retirement? Could you elaborate on that a little bit more for us?
Yes, certainly. I think we established that we used an example of 100,000 in today's terms, and with inflation, that meant 340,000 in 25 years' time. Now, we need a lump sum larger than that figure to generate this income every single year. And even if with a 10% growth rate, that would actually equate to 3.4 million. That's a lot of money.
It is a lot of money.
Now, a 10% growth rate may be too aggressive, especially in today's market. So therefore, even if you considered a 5% growth rate, then that would double it, and it'd need to be 6.8 million. Now, assuming a growth rate of 7.5 still leaves you with the capacity of having to raise 5.1 million.
Yes.
Now, I can assure your audience, after this programme's finished, there will not be a queue of people wanting to do this for you. So this is something that they will need to consider themselves. However, we can take into consideration existing arrangements. Namely, you'll have your company pension scheme, and that will have a value to it in 25 years' time. There may be some existing personal investments and savings that you've already arranged, and there may be an opportunity to sell assets upon retirement, and they can go into the melting pot as well. And it may be that certain assets can be converted and generate income. I know it's quite popular here for there to be rental apartments or other properties, and the list is fairly endless.
So then when you're going to see a client, you're looking at a variety of things in terms of determining how they're going to reach that, say, $340,000.
Absolutely, absolutely. And an individual may even look at capital exhaustion, or they may want to leave a legacy. But needless to say, whatever that figure is, that shortfall, as a financial planner, we can actually sit down with individuals and it calculates exactly what that would be and the contribution level needed to bridge that gap.
Now, let me ask, here is someone that's contributing to the employer retirement fund, and here that same person has his own private retirement fund that he may have gotten through a financial planner. Would it be better for him to contribute more to the employer fund or more to his personal fund that he got through a financial planner?
Well, again, I think this is going to be very much down to the individual. We would need to look at the opportunities that both providers are offering within the company scheme and within the employer scheme. Again, what level of control and what level of input do you want as an individual, the timescales that are involved, and but ultimately to do something is going to be preferable than doing nothing at all. But we need to ensure that it's affordable, it's within their budget. This is, as we said earlier, generally a medium to long-term commitment.
Right. Now, let's say someone has not done any planning for retirement in terms of finances, and here they find themselves in their early 50s. Would you say, well, too bad, it's too late? What would you advise such a person?
Well, I must say, I'd pick up on the old analogy, it's never too late.
Okay.
If you consider that normal retirement age is 65, that individual could be investing for 5, 10, 15 years. That's still considered a medium to long-term investment. Yes, they may need to be paying a little bit of catch-up, but there's flexibility. They may be in a fortunate position where we can actually maybe invest lump sums into their retirement funding programme, in addition to the regular savings. And that commitment level may actually be needed to be slightly higher than it would be if they'd started in their mid-20s, for example. But they've also got the potential, therefore, of actually receiving bonuses and maybe incentives from providers, which ultimately will enhance their overall maturity value.
Okay. Now, here is someone who is self-employed. Is it different for that person in terms of planning for his or her retirement if they're self-employed as compared to working for an employer?
Well, I think that the self-employed do face other opportunities. For the very nature of their occupation, they generally are running a business, and that business may be an asset, and it may therefore be able to be sold in retirement. Obviously, it's subjective to the market, the value, and how fluid that sale would be. They may hold assets that they could sell or goodwill. It may well be that although they retire, they still have a financial interest in the business, and therefore they can generate an income in supplementing any other arrangements they may already put in place. I think, generally speaking, with the self-employed, flexibility becomes quite a big issue with reference to the contribution levels, whether they need to be decreased, whether they need to be increased, can they put lump sums in, and when times are economically hard, maybe they need to access funds as well. So those options become more, shall we say, more important to the self-employed.
Are there any plans out there that would give one bonuses up and beyond, whatever dividends they might be getting? Are there plans that have bonuses?
Yes. Again, it generally is calculated based on the contribution level and the term of the contract. They're not always available for exactly the same providers all of the time. There's windows of opportunity. But if someone's criteria fits their criteria, then if we can issue a bonus, an incentive, it's obviously a very good option.
Okay. Now, is there a minimum amount that one should contribute monthly to their financial retirement program?
I think as I said previously, budget becomes the biggest issue. It's what feels comfortable. We base a lot of this maybe on disposable income and disposable capital. And I mentioned earlier about that I do still feel it's very important that people do have accessible funds, emergency money, rainy day money, and therefore we need to consider that, you know, how are they performing in those other areas as well before we overcommit them to something that maybe, you know, in a short term isn't always going to be affordable.
Right. Now, I'm going to probably back you in a corner and ask you for a certain dollar amount, $200, $300 a month. Is that not enough? Or, you know?
Well, $300, generally speaking, will get you started.
Okay.
And that would be in addition to anything maybe that you're already paying into through your company scheme. Okay. I do appreciate that, you know, not everybody is in that position, but we will definitely be in a position to formulate whether that is comfortable within someone's budget. Okay.
Now, here I am looking for a financial planner. What do I need to look for? What are some keys that I need to look for in terms of talking to this individual? What questions should I ask to make sure that he or she can really help me?
Okay. Well, I believe that it's very important that you speak to an independent financial advisor. Not only would they have the opportunities of investing money here in Bermuda, but they can also work on a global platform as well.
Oh, so you're saying that in terms of investments, they're not only invested here in Bermuda, but also overseas.
Yes.
So, which brings a question to my mind. Are there any taxes that the Bermuda government is going to charge you because the money is invested outside of Bermuda?
No, because we're generally dealing in an offshore market, and therefore we're trying to take advantage of your tax position here. Okay. I think that the advisor needs to have a good understanding of what the individual requires, their goals, and also manage their expectations. And likewise, the individual really needs to have trust in their advisor to know that, and feel confident that they are getting best advice and they're not just dealing with an order taker. So many times it's quite easy to say, well, this is what I want to do, and someone takes your money, invests it, and there is no consultation. And when it comes to consultations, you know, you shouldn't really need to be charged just for an initial consultation. And even if you wish to transact business going forward, again, why are you paying a fee for that? We would like to keep money in your pocket rather than somebody else's. So I think you need to ensure that they're registered correctly with the right regulatory bodies, what compensation schemes that they have available, the advantages, disadvantages. I've mentioned reviewing quite a lot in this process, and I would say that things aren't cast in stone, and so there's a huge amount of flexibility. You can actually stop contributions. You may want to take what we call a contribution holiday, whereby you take your foot off the gas for a period of time and maybe kickstart it again later on. You may want to reduce premiums. You may want to increase. Again, having access to funds before maturity may be quite a valuable point for you. But I think if you get a retirement fund that is multi-purpose, that would be very suitable. And as we've said earlier, providers do supply bonuses and incentives, and they definitely will enhance the maturity value for a plan going forward. But it's got to feel comfortable. You've got to have the financial discipline to want to do this. So realistically, you can really secure your financial future.
Okay. You had said you need a plan that's multi-purpose. In the next minute or so, tell us what you mean by multi-purpose, that a plan should be multi-purpose.
Okay. Well, we sit down and talk to many people, and in the course of our working day, they may indicate to us that they have a certain priority, and that may be today retirement planning. However, maybe with children and educational costs, which seems to be the second most important priority for people, that they actually need to utilise some of those funds. Now, if this was strictly a pension plan, that wouldn't be a consideration. That would be, the money would be tied away and it would be only available within the pension for pension purposes. And so by having a multi-purpose plan means that we could potentially draw monies away and then it could be utilised for school fees planning.
That is key. Mark said when looking for a retirement plan, it needs to be multi-purpose, because if it's just strictly a pension plan, you cannot draw money out of it. Am I correct?
That's correct.
But if
Not
it's
for the purpose of school fees planning in that instance.
But if it's multi-purpose, such a program, such a plan gives you the opportunity and ability to withdraw money for specific purposes.
Absolutely.
Now, are you penalized?
No, there's no penalties involved. If you wanted to take what we would term as a partial surrender. If you considered doing a full surrender, then there is a potential penalty involved at that stage. Okay. But there are obviously certain terms and conditions that we would need to adhere to, and we'd obviously try and formulate a program to suit that individual.
Yeah. Mark, if someone would want to get in touch with you, for you to come to their home, their business, what would they do? How do they get in touch with you?
Well, our offices are in Hamilton. We're in 5 Reed Street. We're also available on the internet. My email address is readily available, and obviously I can be contacted either by cell or directly into my office.
Give us a phone number.
It's 591 66 67, alternatively 297 4375.
Thank you, Mark. Today we've been talking with Mark Ahronson, a financial consultant, and we've been looking at the advantages and disadvantages of early planning for retirement, and probably there are not too many deficits for early retirement planning. Mark pointed out the earlier you start, you may be able to retire before age 65 and maybe live in Hawaii or some remote country. Once again, thank you for joining Issues, and we look forward to having you next time.